Hi, I'm Bonnie Barker with BonnieBayCrochet.com, and today I am so excited to bring you the colorful cables throw. There are many stitches on this afghan. There are actually a total of 14 different textured Aran Celtic styled crochet stitches that you can learn by crocheting this along with me. This is going to be a total of 4 videos. This is video number 1, and if you ever come to one of the other videos and you want to go back, you can just go to the video description below, and the links for all of the videos, once they've been released, will be available in that video description box. Okay, well, let me show you the first video. But before I do, I'm going to just show you real quickly. You're going to be introduced to 5 different stitches. Now, these go quickly if you just play through, but don't forget to hit that pause button when you need. Go back and rewind if you need, using old terms here. So don't feel overwhelmed if you don't get these stitches right away. Okay, it's okay to take some time, and even if you want to just take some practice swatches and work on those before you get out the yarn you want to use for your afghan, that's quite all right too. Well, anyway, in this particular video, you're going to be learning the low front ridge. You're going to learn the arrow stitch. You're going to learn how to do the braided cable stitch, which is really a lot of fun. And again, more low front ridges. You're going to know the low front ridge really well because I use that a lot in this particular design. You also are going to learn how to do the knurl stitch, which is also called the crab stitch or the reverse single crochet. And my favorite, this is one of my favorite stitches of all time, the Celtic Weave. Again, inspired by my daughter Becky too. She inspired me to kind of come up with this, so many years ago. So this is what you're going to learn in video number 1. Okay, if you're a first-time subscriber or first-time visiting my channel, I would just encourage you to please hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss any other of the videos in this project, as well as any other things that I have coming your way. And if you like the project, definitely give it a thumbs up, please. And if you could just hit that little notification bell, you won't miss anything coming that I produce. Okay. The written pattern for this project is available in my online Lovecraft store. The link is right below in the video description should you like to purchase a copy of that. I do highly recommend it, especially for those of you who've never crocheted some of these highly textured stitches. I think it would just give you added information that you might appreciate. Also, for those of you who are veterans to a lot of these stitches, included in this particular pattern is a blank diagram of the afghan that you can fill in, and it will kind of help you to decide your color scheme. This project is designed with 10 colors in mind. The yarn that I'm using is from Lovecrafts. It's called Paintbox, and again, that link is in the video below. You're not required to use that yarn. Obviously, you can use whatever yarn that you prefer. I am using 10 colors, and the diagram, as I mentioned, is going to help you to decide where you would like those colors to be. Now, however, you may decide to make this a solid color, and I truly believe that this would look great in just one solid color. I think the Aran color, the off-white color, would look great, as well as really any solid color. You may want to scale back and only use a few colors instead, and that's perfectly fine as well. Of course, when you do that, you're just going to have to kind of estimate on the yarn needed. Well, anyway, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, the yarn I'm going to be using for this project is by lovecrafts.com. It's Paintbox yarns, and I'm going to be starting with color number 1, which is color number 208, and I'm going to be using a colorway called Wanderlust. So if you go to the link in the description box below, there is a link to that particular color, but don't feel constrained to the colors that I choose. Feel free to make this either a solid color, or if you want to use the Paintbox yarns, I recommend them, and they have many different colorways available that's pre-selected for you, or you can always change it up and pick the colors that you choose, that you prefer. I'm going to be using 10 different colors, but again, you don't feel conscribed to what I'm doing if you want to change it up. And I'm sure many of you have extreme gifts in how to put colors together. So by all means, do what you would love to do with this on the colors. All right. In addition to your yarn requirements, I'm recommending that you use a size J or 10 or 6.00 millimeter crochet hook. And you are going to need a size K or 10.5 or 6.50 millimeter crochet hook when we get to the popcorn stitches. Also, it'd be nice if you have a sharp pair of scissors handy and a yarn needle to hide loose ends, of which there are going to be many as we change the colors on this project. We're going to start, and I'm going to be using the size J or 10 crochet hook. We're going to be using this hook for most of the project. It's just on those popcorns that we're going to need to switch to a larger hook. After making that slip knot, we're going to chain 147 chains. That's a lot of chains, and it's important that you keep the number as accurate as possible. I like to start by chaining in groups of 5, and do make sure that you chain this on the looser side, not super loose, but you don't want this to be tight. And if you tend to be a tighter crocheter on the foundation chain, it's okay to go ahead and bump up to the larger size hook so that the chain is not too tight. But once you do that, don't forget to go back to the size J or 10. Okay, we're going to chain by 5s. This just helps me do not lose track. So that's 10, 15, 20, etc. So I'm going to go ahead and finish my chain of 147. And once we have our chain of 147 chains, we're going to begin row number 1 by working a single crochet in the second chain from the hook. And I am just going to work in the side of the chain. That is just my preference. I find this easier than working in the back bump of the chain. But if you want to work in the back bump, that's fine. But we are going to do a final round that will use the remainder of this stitch. And I believe that just working in the side makes it easier all the way around. But again, you are free to do whatever you prefer. So I'm just going to work these single crochets all the way across. And when I finish, I should have 146. Notice that it is curling a little bit. Don't let that bother you, because the rows that we are going to be working after this are going to take that completely away. Okay, so this is what you should have after you've completed this row. I've got quite a long row here of single crochets. Should have 146. Now we're going to turn, and we're going to begin what we call the low front ridge, or abbreviated LFR in a lot of my patterns. We're going to chain 1, and in this particular stitch we are only going to work in the front loop, which is right here. So let me explain what we're going to do before I show it to you. We are going to work only in the front loop, working a slip stitch. So slip stitch, and I generally skip the first stitch just because when I do that, this chain 1 actually lays in front of that first stitch to visually give us our first stitch. But then when we come back the second pass on this particular stitch, we're going to work in the remaining loop here, and that will also appear once we turn our work. It will also appear to be the front loop, but we're going to call it the remaining loop, and we'll work a single crochet as we come back in that row. So this is a 2-row repeat, and what I'm going to show you with the low front ridge followed by the 2 rows of the arrow stitch followed by 2 more rows of the low front ridge are going to be rows that you are going to repeat in another section of this afghan. So you may have to actually return to this part of the video for that. So let's go ahead, and we're going to skip that first stitch, and we're going to work a slip stitch, just working in that front loop only. Slip stitch. Now this is another row where the stitches can tend to be pulled tight, so you're going to want to be careful that you don't pull these too tightly, and just have a nice relaxed feel as you go across this row. And you can already see how this is straightening out the row and taking away some of that curl that was in the last row. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and work that just in the front loop all the way across. Okay, I've worked those slip stitches, worked only in the front loop all the way across. Notice that I did not work in that turning chain. Now we're going to turn, I'm going to chain 1, and then working in that very first single crochet, you can see that remaining loop right there. Work a single crochet in this stitch and in each stitch across. Now, even though we skipped the first stitch using that slip stitch, our stitch count will remain the same at 146 single crochets, because this row that we're crocheting now is the one upon which we're building the next row upon after we finish this, and it will have 146 stitches because we're not going to skip any of the single crochets like we did in the previous row. I hope that wasn't too much information. I'm just just trying to teach and explain as I go along here. So go ahead and finish this row of single crochet, and let me show you what we just did by working this. I'll just turn real quickly. Okay, this is what we've created. This is the first row, and we've created this beautiful ridge that's going to help us to set apart some of these stitches from one another in the row. Okay, so go ahead and just finish row 3, working that single crochet all the way across. Okay, I just finished row number 3, which is row number 2 of the low front ridge. And I wanted to show you that the curl, for the most part, has fallen out of this. And I just wanted to mention, if your piece is still very curly, it's probably because the chain was done too tight. And if that is the case, at this point, we're only 3 rows in, I would highly recommend that you do what I recommended and go back and re-crochet that chain with a larger hook size so that it's not too tight. Okay, so the stitches should be pretty nice. It shouldn't be super tight on that end. Now we're ready to work the arrow stitch, but before I do, let me mention something about the playback speed. Sometimes I can get carried away and go a little too fast, and I want to give you an option in case you feel like I'm going too fast for you, especially if you're new to my crochet channel and you're learning these stitches for the first time. I'm going to empower you right here, right on this side of the screen. If you're watching from your computer, in this side for the left-handers, there's a little gear icon. If you click that gear, you can select the playback speed. You can slow this down, or you can speed it up if you're getting bored right now. In the right-hand corner of your cell phone, there'll be 3 vertical dots. It'll be on this side for the left-handed version. If you click that, it does the same thing, and you can change, speed up or slow down the video speed of this video or any of the videos on YouTube for that matter. Now we're ready to begin the arrow rows. This is going to be arrow row number 1, but this is actually the 4th row of the project. So we're going to start with a chain 2 and then double crochet in that first stitch along the side, or the first stitch of the row here. Now we're going to wrap our hook to get ready for a treble crochet. We're going to skip 1, 2, 3 stitches, then we're going to treble crochet in the next stitch. Now working behind this treble crochet, we're going to work a double crochet in each of these 3 skip stitches, just like this. We're going to work behind this stitch, and we're going to work a double crochet 1, 2, and 3. Oops, let's try that one again. It got away from me. Okay, so that is what we're going to do all the way across the row. I'll do that for you again. We're going to wrap our hook 2 times to get ready for that treble. Skip the next 3 unworked stitches, 1, 2, 3. Make sure that you don't accidentally double dip in any of these stitches as you go across, because that will greatly throw off your stitch count. So skip 1, 2, 3 stitches, and then treble crochet in that next stitch. Working behind this treble crochet, we're going to work a double crochet in each of those stitches that we just skipped. Let me show that to you one more time, and then I'll let you go on your way across the row. Skip 1, 2, 3 stitches, treble crochet in that next stitch, working behind that treble crochet, work a double crochet in each of those stitches that we just skipped. And that's what it should look like. So go ahead and work that all the way across the row. After working this arrow stitch all the way across the row, you should have 1 stitch left. Go ahead and work a double crochet in that last stitch, and we are not working in the turning chain. Let me go ahead and show you what you should have all the way across your row. And let's go ahead and turn. We're going to chain 2, 1, 2, and by the way, these chain 2s do not count as a stitch, and the reason I'm doing a chain 2 instead of a chain 3 is it kind of minimizes the bulkiness along the edge. Okay, and I also am going to be working in this first stitch again, but just to let you know, this is going to be covered up with a stitch round that will go around the entire circumference, or rather the entire perimeter, I should say, of the project. All right, so for the next row, this is row 2 of the arrow stitch. We're going to start by working a double crochet in that first stitch. Now this is with the back side facing. We are going to skip the next 3 stitches, 1, 2, 3, and work a treble crochet in that next stitch. Now this is also in the same, it should be in a treble crochet from the previous row. After we do that, working in front of that treble crochet, we're going to work a double crochet in each of those 3 stitches that we just skipped. And this is the 3rd one right here. Now go ahead and do that again. That is the repeat all the way across the row. We skip the next 3 stitches, and the 3 stitches do stand out. You see them, they are double crochets. And then the next stitch right here is that treble. So we put a treble in that treble. Working in front of that stitch, we work a double crochet in each of those skipped stitches. So there are 3 of them. And I'll do this one more time. Skip the next 3, 1, 2, 3, and then treble crochet in that next stitch, which is a treble, and working in front of that treble crochet, double crochet in those 3 skipped stitches. And this is what it looks like from the back. But if I flip this around for you, this is the front side, and they do look like arrows. So go ahead and finish this all the way across the row. At the end of row 5, we go ahead and end with a double crochet in that last stitch. We do not work in the chain 2 because that does not count as a double crochet. Okay, now we're going to turn. Now rows 6 and 7 are going to be exactly the same. For row 6, we are going to just chain 1 and work a single crochet in each stitch all the way across. And I'm going to show you the end of the row here. We are going to work only in the stitches, and the last stitch will be worked in the double crochet here. Do not work in the chain 2. And then after that, you're going to turn and do another row of single crochets. So again, just to repeat, row 6 and the following row, row 7, are just going to be work single crochets in each stitch across. So go ahead and complete those 2 rows. Now that we've finished those 2 rows of single crochet, it's time for us to work another front low front ridge, which is what we worked here for rows 2 and 3. So for rows 8 and 9, you're going to repeat rows 2 and 3. I'll go ahead and start you off on this, and then I'll explain my way through so that you can just do these 2 rows together. Skip the first stitch, and this again is working only in the front loop of those stitches. Work slip stitches all the way across, just working in the front loop only. Okay, just like we did before. And I'll show you the end of this row. Once you get to the end, you work the last slip stitch in the last stitch here. Then we're going to chain 1 and turn, and then working in the remaining loop, we will work a single crochet in each of the remaining loops across. So I'll go ahead and work those 2 rows, and then I will show you what I have when I'm finished. Now that I've finished the low front ridge, both rows 1 and 2 of that particular stitch, it's time for us to actually change to color number 2. And for color number 2, I am using this color, which is color number 224. It's kind of a sage green. Again, this is part of the palette with the lovecrafts.com yarns, and this is called Wanderlust color grouping. Okay, so now we're going to change out to the next color, and I'm going to show you how to do that. We're going to back this last stitch out. I'll just go ahead and redo this for you. This is working in that last stitch, and we work that single crochet. But before we pull this through, what we're going to do is we're going to use color number 2 and pull it through just like this. Now I do know that we need to chain 3, I believe it is, for the next row. So I'm going to just leave that there. I'm going to get this yarn, or scissors rather, and cut the color number 1. And I'm going to go ahead and tie these together in a knot just like this, and work them down just like that. And don't worry about the knots. We are going to be working perimeter rounds, and all that stuff is going to be covered up quite nicely. Okay, now the next stitch I get to introduce you to is called the braided cable. Now for the very first stitch, actually let's back that 1 stitch out, make this a chain 2, not a chain 3. Okay, we're going to work a double crochet right there in the first stitch, just like we did with the arrow stitch. Okay, so now we're going to be starting the braided cable. We're going to work front post and back post treble crochets, and yes, you can work them around single crochets. And this is what we're going to do. We're going to skip the first 2 stitches after we've worked this double crochet. So skip these 2 stitches, and the next 2 stitches we just wrap the hook around that single crochet just the way you would any other stitch, and we work a treble crochet, and do that in the next one just like that. Now we're going to work in front of these 2 stitches. We're going to front post treble in the 2 stitches that we skipped right here, and the one right next to it. This might be a little trickier with these single crochets, but I promise you once you do it a couple times, it works very well. Now this is where we work in the next 2 stitches. And that is a 6 stitch repeat. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And we're going to do that all the way across the row. Skip the next 2. Front post treble the next 2 stitches, now working in front of these last 2 stitches we made, we're going to front post treble in the 2 skipped stitches. Now we don't skip any stitches here, we just do the next 2 stitches. Do front post treble crochet in the next 2 stitches. And that's what we're going to work all the way across the row. I'll go ahead and do this one more time. Skip 2 stitches, front post treble crochet in the next 2 stitches. Again, I'm coming around the stitch like this. Now working in front of these last 2 stitches, we're going to front post treble in those 2 skipped stitches. And now we just front post treble in the next 2 stitches. And let's stop and take a look at what we should have. Okay, so go ahead and work that all the way across the row. So after working this 6 stitch repeat all the way across, we're going to work a double crochet just worked through the top loops of that last stitch, and that ends row number 10. Now we're going to turn, we're going to chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and we're going to double crochet in that first stitch, which is a double crochet. And notice we did chain 3. We are going to be working back post treble crochets, so we're going to skip the next 2 stitches, and these 2 stitches that are kind of leaning towards us from the other side, we're going to back post treble in those 2 stitches. Now we're going to be working in front of these 2 stitches as seen from the front side, which is this side. So our hook is actually going to go around and reach these 2 stitches that we skipped. Just like that. And then we're going to back post treble in the next 2 stitches, which happen to be these 2 stitches right here. And that is the repeat that you're going to work all the way across. I'll show you the other side in just a minute, but let's do this repeat one more time. Skip the next 2 stitches, and these 2 that are leaning towards you from the back side, we're going to back post treble crochet in those 2 stitches, and now working in front of these 2 stitches as seen from the front side, which is the opposite side of us right now. We're going to front post treble in those, back post treble rather, in those 2 stitches that we just skipped. Let me try that one again. It got away from me. And then after we do those 2, we're going to just do the very next 2 stitches, which is right here coming in from the back. It's a back post, come in the back door. Those back post treble crochets. Okay, let me show you what this looks like with the front side facing. You can see the braid is starting to come together. With a couple of more rows, you will see this much more clearly. I'll do this for you one more time, and then I'm going to give you a small assignment. Okay, we're going to skip the next 2 stitches, back post treble in the next 2 stitches, working in front of these 2 stitches as seen from the front side. We're going to come around, okay, and we're going to back post treble in those 2 skipped stitches, just like that, and then back post treble in the next 2 stitches. So go ahead and work that all the way across the row. The front side should be looking like that. Okay, so go ahead and finish that row. Once you get to the end of this row, we're just going to double crochet in the top of that one double crochet at the end of the row. And let's turn and see what we have here. This is really looking nice. Now I'm going to go ahead and start you on the third row of the braided cable, and it starts just like the first row did, with a chain 2, a double crochet in that first stitch, and just like we did before, although it should be easier to work this row, we're going to skip the next 2 and the 2 stitches that are leaning towards you. Go ahead and front post treble in those 2 stitches, working in front of these 2 stitches. We front post treble in these 2 stitches here. And then we simply front post treble in the next 2 stitches, which are hiding a little bit behind here. We just go ahead and pick those out. Make sure that each of your braids has 6 stitches in them. And you can see it really is starting to look more like a braid as these intertwine. So go ahead and repeat that all the way across, and then you're going to repeat the second row that we worked previous to that, and then totally we're going to, or for total, we're going to repeat rows 1 and 2 3 more times until you have 8 rows. After working 7 rows of the braided cable, I wanted to show you what we have. 7 rows, it's time to turn, and the 8th row, or the last row of this braided cable, is worked with the backside facing, and it is a little bit different. Go ahead and chain 2 stitches to begin this row, and starting in the next stitch, like we've been doing, we're just going to work back post double crochets all the way across the row, just straight up. We're not going to be crossing anything or skipping anything. Just go ahead and work those, and this will discontinue the braided cable, and it'll give us a nice even row so that we can work the next set of stitches upon. So after working this all the way across, we are going to work a double crochet just in the top of that double crochet, but we're not going to complete the stitch yet because it's time for us to change to our new color. And I'm going to be using this lighter tan, and I'll give you the lot number right here in case you're using the same as I am, or the color number 207. It's part of the Paintbox yarns. And let me go ahead and get that. Okay, here we go. So go ahead and pull this yarn through. Make sure you leave a nice tail to complete that stitch. And then go ahead and give it a chain just to kind of secure it. And then we need to trim the green sage color. I'm going to go ahead and knot these 2 colors together, just like so. All right, now we have our chain 1. It's time for us to turn and just take a look before we get started here on this next section. This is what you should have up until this point, and just notice how that last row makes this very even for us to work in for the next border stitches. So we're going to once again work the low front ridge rows 1 and 2. Again, we skip the first stitch, and the low front ridge again is just working in the front loop, working a slip stitch in each stitch as we go across. And then remember, once we get to the end, we chain 1, and then working in the remaining loop, which is right here, it will be facing you in the front. As you go through this, you're going to work a single crochet in that remaining loop, just like we did in the very early rows. So go ahead and work those 2 rows all the way across. After finishing that low front ridge, which looks like this, we're going to now work 4 rows of the knurl stitch. To start that, we are going to work a chain 1, and we are going to single crochet in each stitch all the way across. Okay, now we're ready to work row number 2 of the knurl stitch. Now this is a little different than some of the other stitches, and instead of working it in the normal crochet direction, we work it in the opposite direction. And we're only going to use, I'm going to go ahead and show you with my hook, we're only going to use the front loop as we go from this direction to this direction. Now, after we complete the row, then we're going to chain 1, and then we're going to work single crochets in the remaining loop, which is, you know, right here. Okay, so I'll go ahead and show this to you. Those of you who are familiar shouldn't have too much of a problem, but I'm going to go ahead and chain 1. And if you're a newbie to some of these stitches, don't be afraid to try them, and do not try to control how the loops lie. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're working backwards, and I'm going to skip the first stitch, and we're going to start in the second stitch, working only in that front loop, and we're working a single crochet backwards. Pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, and go to the next front loop, which is right here. Pull up a loop, yarn over, and pull through 2. Notice I am not trying to control how the loops lie. Okay, I'm keeping my tension as normal as I can. And this does take a little bit of time to get used to, but the biggest thing is, especially for seasoned crocheters trying this for the first time, is don't try to control anything. Just let the loops lie where they may. And I think as long as your tension is even, you should be fine. It's one of my favorite texturized stitches, and if you need more stitch support on this stitch or any of the other stitches, I do have complete videos that are just very much stitch related. If you just look under the playlist of Celtic Aran stitches, and they're all listed for you. Sometimes having a different perspective is helpful. So go ahead and just work this all the way to the end. When you get to the last stitch, just work a reverse slip stitch, and I will go ahead and show that to you when we get to that point. So after working this reverse single crochet or the knurl stitch all the way across, we come to that last stitch, and for this we're just going to do a reverse slip stitch. So we stick our hook in, pull the yarn through, and pull the yarn through that loop. And this way it keeps this stitch lined up with the end stitches. Okay, so now we're going to chain 1, and working in that remaining stitch, which is the back loop of that single crochet row, go ahead and work a single crochet in each stitch all the way across the row. Okay, once you finish this is row 3 of the knurl stitch. Once you finish working those single crochets all the way across, I want you to chain 1 and then work single crochets all the way across the row again. As you're working the row that comes back, working single crochet, you are going to be working in both loops. Make sure you work in both loops just like you normally would. After working those 2 rows, this is what you should have. So we have just completed 1, 2, 3, 4 rows of the knurl stitch. Now it's time to work another 2 rows of the low front ridge. That's the stitch we worked here, first part of that. Remember, we skipped the first stitch, working only in the front loop. Work slip stitches all the way across the row, just working in the front loop, and then as we chain 1 and turn, then we're going to work that single crochet in that remaining loop all the way back. So go ahead and work those 2 rows. Okay, before I crochet that last stitch, we're getting ready to change colors again, and I'm using the color number 231. So now as we work that last stitch in that last single crochet, we are going to just pull up a loop. Before we complete that stitch, we're going to go to our new color, and pull that on through so it will be as seamless as possible. Now go ahead and chain 2 for now. That will kind of secure that color, and then we need to trim the color number 3, and then we're going to tie these together. I hope you're enjoying the colors as much as I am. Usually I make these in solid, just one color and focus mostly on the texture, but I'm really enjoying changing it up a bit. Okay, so now to begin this, we're going to chain 2, as we've already done, and we're going to double crochet in that first stitch. And just as another reminder, this chain 2 does not count as a double crochet. This is actually the first stitch of this row. Now we're going to begin working the Celtic Weave stitch. This is one of my favorite stitches. It's one that my daughter Becky inspired me to kind of come up with many years ago, and first appeared in the Erin Afghan's crochet leaflet by Leisure Arts. Okay, so go ahead. So for this stitch, we're going to skip the first 2 stitches, but instead of working in through the top loops, we're actually going to work those post stitches again, kind of like we did back down with the braided cable stitches. Remember how we did that? So we do need to be careful that we count these stitches carefully. So we're going to skip this stitch and just working with the post. We're going to go around the stitch just like that, and we're going to work a front post treble crochet, and in the next stitch we're going to do that again, a front post treble crochet. This can be a little bit challenging of a stitch, but I think if you take it slowly, you can learn this. Okay, so now working in front of these 2 stitches, we're going to front post treble around the 2 stitches that we just skipped. So this is very similar to the first 4 stitches of the braided cable, but what I'm going to show you next is where it differs from that stitch. Okay, so we're now that actually the 4 stitches we just worked is the repeat that you're going to work all the way across the row. Skip the next 2 stitches and then front post treble in the next 2 stitches. Working in front of those 2 stitches, front post treble in the 2 stitches that were just skipped. To pull up some more yarn here. Then we're going to do that all the way across, and this is called the Celtic Weave. After working that all the way across the row, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use that same stitch that I worked in, and I'm just going to work a double crochet in that last stitch just like that. Okay, that is row 1 of the Celtic Weave. Now we're going to turn, and I am going to chain 2, 1, 2. I'm going to work a double crochet, working through the top loops of that first double crochet. Now we're going to work row 2 of the Celtic Weave, and we start that by working back post treble crochets in the first 2 stitches. Now, the next 2 stitches, we're going to skip 1, 2, and in the next 2 stitches, we're going to work back post treble crochets. 1 in each of those stitches, just like that. Now, this is where it gets a little bit tricky, working in front of these 2 stitches as seen from the front side, just similarly to what we did with the braided cable stitches. We're going to work in front of these 2 stitches, and we're going to come around, and these 2 stitches that we skipped, we're going to go ahead and work back post trebles around those. If you can see what it looks like from the back side there. Okay, now I'm going to primarily be depending upon the neurons again in my thumb and tall man finger. And then we're going to do that all the way across. Skip the next 2 stitches, back post treble in the next 2 stitches, and working in front of the last 2 stitches as seen from the front side. See, this is the front side. It's facing the opposite direction. So we come around, and these are the 2 stitches that we're going to work around. First, this one, and then the second one right there. And so when we look at it from the front side, this is what it should look like. So go ahead and work that row all the way across. So after working this Celtic weave all the way across, we come to the last 2 stitches, and we just work 2 back post treble crochets without skipping after these other 2 that were worked. And then the last stitch, we're going to work a double crochet, working through the top loops of that double crochet. Let's go ahead and turn and see what this looks like. Okay, this is again row 1 and row 2 of the Celtic weave. This was with the front side facing, and this was just work with the back side facing us. Now we're going to repeat rows 1 and 2 4 more times. And we start again with that chain 2 and a double crochet in that first stitch of the row. And so after working that first double crochet that's worked through the top loops, now we're ready to begin our Celtic weave. We skip the next 2 stitches, and we front post treble crochet in the next 2 stitches. You can see it's going to look a lot easier doing these rows than it was the very first row. Working in front of these 2 stitches we just worked, you're going to front post treble over those first 2 stitches that we skipped. And we're going to do that all the way across. Skip the next 2 stitches, which are the 2 kind of hidden stitches back here, and then we front post treble over these 2 stitches. Working in front of these 2 stitches, we're going to front post treble over the 2 stitches. They're a little bit hidden back here, but these are the 2 that we skipped. And go ahead and front post treble. I'll do this for you one more time just to make sure that's clear. So one more repeat of this. We skip the next 2 stitches, front post treble in the next 2 stitches. Working in front of these 2 stitches, we're going to front post treble in the 2 stitches that we skipped. And again, these are the 2 hidden. It's really easy to forget to do these stitches, so you want to make sure that you don't forget these, because if you do, the Celtic weave is definitely going to look a little different in that spot. Okay, so now that we have 3 rows, you can see how this stitch weaves in and out. Okay, so far I have finished 9 rows of the Celtic weave. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and for row number 10, this is the last row of the Celtic weave. We're going to go ahead and turn. We're going to chain 2, 1, 2, and we're going to work a double crochet in that first stitch. Now this is the row that we're going to work that's going to discontinue the Celtic weave. This is again row 10 of the Celtic weave section. We just work back post double crochets all the way across the row, similar to what we did when we discontinued the braided cable stitch. So just work the back post double crochet all the way across that row, and when you get to the last stitch, which is here. We just work a double crochet in the top of this double crochet, working through the top loops there of that last stitch. Well, I hope you enjoyed the beginning of this colorful cables throw. If you did, please give me that thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed already, please hit that subscribe button. If you need additional stitch support, please look in the video description below, and I will have a link to a playlist of all the Aran Celtic stitches in just a stitch by stitch format, very short to look at should you need additional help. Well, I will look forward to seeing you in video number 2. God bless. Bye-bye.